Well, we'll go right into sexual purity here, and which has been touched on some by implication. I'm just thinking a couple of situations right now where I am not counseling a young woman. I'm kind of mentoring her. I mentioned her. So it's a little quiet on our hall. So usually the way that it goes whenever I have a woman here, they're all people going up and down the hall all the time. I, by the way, have a large glass door in my office. There's a little frost on it, but you could see anything in there. Now, when a female comes in, I say you can do with the door what you want to, because I'm definitely not going to shut it behind her. And usually the woman will keep it open or partly open, which is fine. Right now it's a little quiet, so I've already checked with the administrators. Are you going to be here on Friday? Yep. You going to be here Friday? Yep. Okay, just so make sure. And I'm also going to check for another place on campus, just in case they're not. Because not only do I want to be safe, but I want her to feel safe. Because she looks at me as a dad, and I'm going to take care of her. Okay, now there's another woman that I've met with, and she wrote me an email, actually wrote to me and my wife, asking us, would you like to come to dinner? I would like to cook for you. And she said, Dr. Green, you and your wife are invited. It was a good letter. You and your wife are invited. And then she said, I would like to have you both over. Now, it wasn't bold in italics, but that was good. And I told my wife about this, okay, because she's neither here nor there about this because she doesn't know them. But still, the implication for my wife was, you would be crazy to go to their house by yourself. Like, did you even think about this? I said you were invited too. Did you even think about this? Well, I better say no. Now, the truth is, I would trust any of those three like my daughters, especially three of them together. Nothing is going to happen, but my wife was right. All has to happen. Just one say something. Now, she doesn't know them, so she's essentially saying, yeah, well, it doesn't mean you are not going. I know, you are invited. Okay, but my wife is on this, and it's very true. You have to be careful. You have to be careful. So careful. But you can be too careful, too. And too careful is when the women in your congregation don't have access to their pastor. Only the men do. So essentially now, the pastor is only the pastor of the men and not of the women. Okay? So there's a big thing here nowadays. I won't meet with women. Now you're saying you wouldn't counsel them. I won't meet with women. Now Dr. Pam McCrae at Moody has kind of pushed back against this. She's in pastoral studies. And she really wants, why can't a woman come to the pastor and talk to him about theology? The other guys in the church don't know enough to challenge her. Why can't she do this? I am sympathetic toward that. On the other hand, you do need to be careful. I will meet with women in my congregation. But I've already said, so you know now I'm going to a church, I'm going to be there in the middle of the week. And I've already said from the pulpit, and the elders asked me, talk about this. I said, if you have counseling needs, come, but in the case of a female, we'll have somebody else on campus. Smaller church, we're always going to have somebody there, though. And I'm with Newt 100%. If you meet by yourself, you are messing with total depravity. You have to have a respect for depravity. Well, I'm not attracted to women in my congregation. Well, you are a liar. You're lying to yourself. Dr. Green, what are you talking about? Here's the deal. Okay, so every year I was in the pastorate. You're attracted to women. Here's the deal. Okay, well, she would normally be attracted to me, but I'm the pastor, so I'm not attracted. Yeah, you're lying. You're lying to yourself. Or, well, she's married, so I'm not attracted to her. Yes, you are. So here's the deal. She was attractive before marriage. She's attractive now. She was attractive before you were a pastor. She's attractive now. So number one, I would say, admit it. They're attractive because they're Christians. They're attractive because they're sold out for the Lord. They're attractive because they want to grow. Now you put in addition to this, every year in the seminary, there are a number of women come in and they're attractive. Dr. Green, what's wrong? Well, the whole list before, and now they're smart. Now, if you're a professor, you like smart women. No? Only a himbo likes a bimbo. Don't tell that story, but anyway. You know what a himbo is? Okay, the women do. But do you know what a himbo is? It's this guy all stacked up, but he doesn't have any brains. Okay, never mind. I think that is one of our biggest deceptions, and one of the things that gets us into trouble is when we don't admit the attraction. So like I say, just about every year, there are grad school students come in, and I was sitting in my office. I have a buddy down the door a couple of ways, and I'll say, okay. I go down to his office, and I say, I won't say his name, Doctor, just so you know, I'm kind of attracted to so-and-so. You know the name? Yep, I'm giving you the name. Okay. He just, thanks. And that's it. I say it. Okay. Otherwise, you're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself. Now, it's a little more dangerous when you know somebody for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years. That attraction can actually become greater. So number one, I'd say don't kid yourself, you're attractive. Or you're a liar. Now, the important thing is, when you're attracted, not to act on it. Right? And when I say don't deny it, you don't say to the woman, I'm attracted to you. Hello? Hello? But I think this needs to be taught to seminarians, to men and women, that you will be attracted to people in ministry. Because they're attractive. If you weren't married, this is a person in whom you would be interested. So admit that to yourself. I would say tell a buddy about it. Well, Dan, why don't you tell your wife? What, am I stupid? Now here's the problem with telling your wife, is you don't know what your motivation is. My counseling prof in seminary said your motivation might be bad. Your motivation might be, you're really saying to your wife, if you gave me a little more, I wouldn't be so interested in other women. Watch out for your motivations. Motivations are a big deal in ethics. Big deal. It is interesting, though, in my history, my wife knows who I like before I know. She says to me, I remember once specifically, you need to watch out for her, you're going to like her. What are you telling me this for? Yeah, I met her. Yeah, I liked her. Click. You guys click with some women in your congregation, don't you? Don't lie. You click. Woo, 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 click. Click. Because they are smart. And really, in some ways, the more holy they are, the better they are, the more you click. The ones that are just, little carefree, you're not that interested in. But morals are going down. I was at a church in Indiana, preaching 3 services in the morning, tired, and so forth. I preached, I think it must have been in 1 Peter 2 somewhere. It was about lusts and waging war against the soul. And I talked about this a little bit, what it meant morally. And there was a woman, I would say about middle age. she walked up the aisle, and normally there'd be an elder standing about as far as Newt was, and he was that day, but he wasn't paying attention. She came up the aisle to me, and she looked at me in the eye with a little grin, and she said, "I don't see what's wrong with playing around a little bit." And then she left. I was so stunned, I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything. Had I, I would have called her out. But that was an invitation of sorts, or just a little defiance that she's saying, I think she said, "I'm fooling around." That was a little defiance there that I'd not heard before. She's probably trying to justify herself in a relationship. But in these circumstances, boy, that old doctrine of depravity, that's a big one, just to realize that you are capable of doing bad things. Being in the place of trust puts us in more vulnerability because people will tell you things they wouldn't tell you otherwise. I've heard things from women that they would not tell any other man. They wouldn't tell me if I weren't the pastor. And speaking of Newt and the attraction women have to you, they're attracted to you because you're the pastor. If you were not the pastor, they would not give you the time of day. Okay? You're in a power position. They're attracted to the power and the honor, and they trust you probably too much. Too much. You're not really worthy of all that trust. So you need to be very careful of this. I have safeguarded myself a lot. I'm kind of, I've been in ministry now, let's see, 81, 19, 37 years. I've never had the opportunity. Now that may be for a couple of reasons. Number one, God may know I couldn't do it, couldn't handle it. 1 Corinthians 10:13, some of it might be the boundaries I've put up. I have never on any occasion ridden alone with a woman in a car. In fact, in the grad school, this is almost a prolific thing because there's a class where I tell this story. I say to the women, if I see you in a rainstorm, it's pouring rain, I will put down the window and throw you an umbrella. I will not pick you up alone. So, finally, there were 3 women invited me with their families after graduation to go out to dinner, and they rode together with me in my car. It was a rainy day, so they had to take a video. Dr. Green gave us a ride, but not alone. Okay, so. How are you? You okay? You're convicted, or you're just stunned after lunch, or you're in your food coma, or what?
We're engaged.
Yeah, sex is a big deal. Now, let's do a little theology of sex. It's monstrously important. Even the language, this language of intimacy, of indwelling, being in somebody, being united with them, that's Trinitarian language, right? The Father is in the Son is in the Father, the Spirit, this unity. So when we're having sex with somebody, there is a unity there that it reflects the Godhead itself. The very language of union is strong language. I think as pastors we need to think about sex quite a bit, and we need to think about how to talk about it with our congregations, and we need to be pretty open about it too. Careful with the way we talk about it with our language and so on. But we need to be open. Also, when it gets to sexual matters, we need to teach in counseling. We need to be careful. I remember when I was about 30, maybe 35, there was a woman in the congregation. She came to me, and I think I'd just done a popcorn application. Maybe you need to forgive somebody for this. Named a bunch of things. And She came to me, you know how you do a lot of counseling in the foyer? You don't really want to do it there, but that's where it comes and nowhere else. She just came to me and said, Dan, I want you to know, she's 60, I'm 35, I want you to know when I was a little girl, I was sexually abused by so-and-so. My mother told me not to tell, and you are the only person in the world I've ever told this. Okay. Well, that's quite a confession. That's quite a trust. There was another woman in the congregation, quite a bit younger, and she had been sexually abused by her stepbrothers. And she came to me several times. Now, at that time, we didn't have a church building, so I did counseling in my living room, and normally my wife was with me. And by now we had 2 or 3 children, so my wife was not able to be there in the room, but she was with the kids in the house. She stayed in the house. But I talked through this. Now, when it comes to abuse, I don't see that as much a sexual issue as I do an act of violence. It's not primarily sexual. She was violent. There was violence done against her. But there was a great trust there, and she did tell me things that will forever, I'll go to the grave with them. I remember at one point she said these stepbrothers of hers had been beaten by the dad when he found out. He gave him a good beating, and I said to her, that's good, isn't it? I'm glad it happened. Sometimes the men in your congregation are going to open up to you about sex too. They probably won't come to your office as readily. I remember after baseball practice once, a guy came to me and he said, we're sitting there in the car, and he said, he shared with me some troubles he was having with his wife. We talked about that. If nobody in your congregation ever comes to you and talks to you about serious things, you probably don't have too much of a ministry yet. But when they talk to you about sexual issues, that's about as deep as it gets. That's right at the core of the being. I'm with Newt. We tend sometimes to look twice. Bouncing the eyes is a good thing to do. The issue is when people are going to be in front of you in the congregation week after week after week, maybe multiple times, not only are you looking twice, you're looking 100 times. You can't help it. So now there are boundaries you need to set. I tell you, I've never driven alone in a woman with in the car. If a youth pastor gave a girl a ride home, that would be a firing offense the first time for me. 0 tolerance. Well, how do you do it? Well, you wait there in the church parking lot with her and tell the parents to come. Oh, you can give him a ride home. We don't want to come and get her. Or you arrange this where you have several kids in the car and you have a male rider and the boy is the last one you let off. But a youth pastor, and if any of you are youth pastors, if you drive alone with a girl in the car, you're crazier and crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. You can go to jail. And I'll fire you too. I'll fire you just like that. No questions asked. Got to watch out for these emails too. Watch out for emails. You keep those pretty clean, pretty businesslike. Don't start exchanging emotions. So here's the deal. I make a distinction between mentoring and counseling. In counseling, you're basically trying to help another person with intimate issues, and it's primarily one way. You're helping them. If you're in counseling and you cross over and start sharing your own personal life, you're close to abuse right there. You're close to a problem. I think when you're doing mentoring, you're sharing personal experiences back and forth because you're trying to impute your life into somebody else. But think about that. I see also mentoring being more professional than personal. Counseling, I think, is also a point on the spectrum of discipleship. People shouldn't be all excited, oh, he's going for counseling. Some people think you shouldn't have to go for counseling, you got something wrong with your head. Well, I think that counseling is specialized discipleship. There's an area we need to work on here, and we're going to get down into this and think about your motivations. There's an acronym I learned either in a counseling book or from others at Moody. It is HALT. H-A-L-T, and you've heard this, some of you. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those are the alerts. HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those are the places of vulnerability. If I were to do this right now, so a lot of times I'm not usually hungry. I always have had something to eat. But angry, lonely, tired, yeah, I've been angry, I've been lonely and tired at the same time. You got 3 of those, you better watch out. It's just a time of vulnerability. Right now, hungry, no. Angry, no. Lonely, a little bit probably because I'm away from my colleagues and friends, students. Tired, not especially right now. But there are times when you could have 3 or 4 of those, and that's just a time when you need to be alert. Because you need a lot of strength and resistance to stand under temptation. About the time I was, January, I was processing this release from Moody. And one of the things I do on the train, I ride the train in the morning, I try to read Greek New Testament on the way in. I just happened to come to 1 Corinthians 16:13. You know how a passage sometimes rises up off the page? You've read it a lot of times, but now this came up. It said this, stand firm. Be alert. Stand firm in the faith. Be manly. Be strong. I printed that thing off, those verses, and I handed them out to some people. I said, please pray this for me. Right? Now, those first 2 terms, be strong, stand fast in the faith, they're used habitually of spiritual warfare. It's used in Ephesians 6, it's used in 1 Peter 5, it's used other places. I think God was telling me, you are going to come under temptation during this time. I want you to, I love that, be manly. That is a verb there. It is a very masculine verb. I don't know how a woman can be manly. Some translations just say be strong or something, but it's redundant. It's andros, andresista. Be manly. So there's a sense there, suck it up. You're in warfare here. And sure enough, it wasn't too long that the temptation came. The temptation came. You just have to resist this, right? God gave me a warning on that. Resist that. 1 Corinthians 16:13. I don't know if you're a journalizer or not, but you should take that down. Maybe you want to take that down. I don't like to say you should. Do it if you want to, but that's a very good verse to think on when it comes to this. But halt is big. So when I'm teaching spiritual warfare, I try to get people to think about their temptations, also to think about their triggers. Now, the trigger is the thing that comes right before you fall. You know what it's going to be. Okay. So a guy, say he's into porn, the wife turns him down for sex, and now he's angry. See, there's the trigger. I'm angry with my wife, I'm going to porn. Most guys on pornography have an anger with woman problem. So, that trigger there. Okay. What's the trigger? So the idea here is if you can grow in this way, when the trigger comes, now you recognize it, okay? My wife turns me down. Every man's been turned down, guys. Get used to it, okay? It's your idea to keep coming. Keep coming. That's the way God made you. She's the responder. Sometimes she doesn't respond. So don't get all torqued off about it. It doesn't do any good. Have you noticed? So anyhow, when that trigger comes, you need to say, instead of resorting to my default, I need to come to the Lord, right? Because here's some more news. Your wife wasn't made for your satisfaction. Do not make your wife into your mommy, okay? Everybody say, no mommy. That's right. She's not your mama. She is not your mama. She's not your God. So one thing that some guys do, they actually make idols out of their wives. Some kind of goddess. And she's not built to meet all your needs. God is. So this is an important time to go back, to have a good relationship with your wife. And I mean in all aspects of life. But go to the Lord too. Go to the Lord. That's always going to be the most important thing, is to love Him so that your wife is not your main relationship. Your main relationship is the Lord.
We're seeing a slow rise in the church of women who are attending and men who aren't. How's the pastor supposed to approach that issue? Some of these guys aren't checking in. Some of these guys we see in the community.
Yep.
And a lot of these women are almost strong women, where they're learning how to do things by themselves, and they don't have the dependence upon the spouse anymore. What's our attitude to be with them?
Yeah. I would say probably 80% of the counseling I did was women in that situation, where they're just more dependent ones, just trying to hold on with a guy who won't lead and who's not interested. I think when you have, at least in my experience, the seasonal things like a Thanksgiving service, Christmas, Easter, those guys show up. I think that's a time to really spend time with them as much as you can. Or if you can get that guy outside of the church. In our culture, where I was in the country, it would be go shooting. Every other, well, little advertisement, out in the country, every other house has firearms and nobody ever gets shot. Okay, well, anyway, we'd probably go out and shoot, do manly stuff with them, invite them when they go to a ball game, that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean they're going to come, but I think that's the best shot at it. And the counsel to the women there would be that 1 Timothy 3. Don't be preaching to your husband all the time. Try to draw back and have a godly example. So sometimes when you're saying those women are strong, they could be giving that guy tongue lashing at home. They come across godly at church. They might not be doing the right thing at home. They need to calm down and live with him and love him no matter what, and not knock off the preaching, I would say. That's a hard one though, and I would say also address the boys in the church and try to pair them up or get them in relationships at least with the solid men in your church. So if you have some men and boys outings, make sure that the orphan boys are invited too. Not just father, son, but have men and boys things so those women could bring their sons to that. I think that would help. We've emasculated the men in our culture, where they've become very passive. I go back to saying, you see these strong women in the seminary. To some of the guys, I want to say, guys, what are you doing? Do you see who's in front of you? Do something about it. Some do and some don't. But I do think, back in the day, we took more initiative with women. And if you wanted to go on a date with some woman, just ask her. I say to my students, ask first, pray later. You do not have to pray for 3 months to ask a girl out for coffee. Just ask her. If she says no, big deal. Go on to somebody else. These egos, it can be so fragile. Just, you want a wife, go get one. Go get one. Yeah, I don't know. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of babbling here a little bit on that. 3:6 in there, about 3:5, 3:6, yeah. That's where it says study your wives, but then the wife is supposed to be more silent. The Bible is for today. Men are still supposed to lead, women are still supposed to respond. And leadership, I think, is initiative and example. It doesn't mean I'm the boss. You soon find when you get married you're not. But initiative and example. Initiative and example. I don't think that a lot of the stuff that happens sexually is about lust. I think it is a lot about abuse of power. Newt has alluded to this as well. When you are the pastor or when you are the professor, you are not in a position of equality with your parishioner or with your student. You're in a place of power. And when you take advantage of a person who trusts in you, you are a predator. It's predatory. That person comes to you in a weakened state, or they come to you in a place of complete trust. They feel safer with you than anybody else, maybe, and they should be able to do that. So do not take advantage of that. Oh, if I could say anything to you about reading, I would, and I'm going to say this to these that I'm mentoring right now, you should read through the pastoral epistles every week. It takes you 50 minutes. I'm entering back into this from being a prof. I'm going to try to read through the pastoral epistles, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, every week. And that 50 minutes, that was even with time to look up something in a commentary, one thing. You can't be looking at every single thing. Just read through those. They help make you strong. You're supposed to teach the older, treat the older women as mothers, the younger women as sisters with all purity. So we're supposed to have family relationships in the church. A family are not cold. You're not cold. You're warm, and you love people, but you have boundaries. Now, as I've gotten older, I have to tweak that passage a little bit because the ones that are old enough to be my mothers are dead. So, now it's almost treat the older women as sisters, the younger women as daughters with all purity. I'm at the place now where my students, I'm older than their parents by a little bit. There's a lot of deception in this. That younger woman, she's looking at you like a father or a grandpa, but you think, oh. You're heading for a fall because you think you're big. Remember, they wouldn't give you the time of day if you weren't the pastor. Not the time of day. Do you want to talk about this, or are you all scared to talk about it?
sex in the pulpit?
I'm an expository preacher, so I preach through books and I teach about it whenever it comes up, which is just about every book in the Bible. Really. We might be afraid to talk about it. God isn't. The apostles talk about this regularly. They're right out there straight. These letters, man, they wrote these letters to the congregation. The congregation is going to read them in front of men and women. It's right out there. Song of Solomon, man, whoo! That has absolutely nothing to do with Christ in the church. Zero. Zero. It has to do with romance. So that's good. I like Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 5. It's a great verse. Who is that coming up out of the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? The wilderness, right? Throughout Scripture, the place of testing, place of difficulty. This couple, they made it through, right? She's leaning on him. He's taking care of her. It's just a great verse. Somebody came and preached that at a Valentine's banquet we had at church once. It's quite impressive. The problem in sexual issues is not women. I want you to get that through your heads. The problem is you. The problem is me. A woman's a woman. She's a woman. She's attractive. She's attractive. She shouldn't be penalized because she's a woman, nor attractive. I mean, what's she supposed to do? Put on the ugly before she comes to see you? What do you want her to do exactly? The problem is you. How would you want your daughter treated? How would you want your little sister treated? Treat her like that. Now, I've got two nieces. They're 5 and 7 years younger than me. Good-looking women. It never occurs to you that you do something with them. Yeah, it's gross. It's gross. So it should be your thoughts. This woman here, she's my sister. I'm going to take care of her. This is a big responsibility, isn't it? God wants me to take care of her. What about Titus 2:1 through 4? Doesn't that say the older women should teach the younger? Yes, the older women, I think, should teach the younger women how to be good mothers and how to be good husbands. I don't think that passage says that a man should never meet with a woman, or a pastor should never meet with a woman. How are you going to develop a Titus 2 woman as a discipler? Somebody has to disciple her in the first place. Who's that going to be? That might be you. Right. It's never been quieter in here before. Are we okay? Are you all guys thinking about the attractive women in your congregation? No, there aren't any, right? Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing, too. I don't know why this works this way, but when you're 20, you're attracted to 20-year-olds. When you're 30, you're attracted to 30s and 20s. When you're 40, you're attracted to 30. Anyway, the number of attractive women just increase as you get older. Women you'd never look at before, now you look at. Don't look at me like that, guys. Your day is coming. Okay? You mean, Dr. Green, you think 60-year-old, ooh, yeah. Yeah. Now let's talk about times of vulnerability. When I just did a funeral here at the church about 10 days ago. There's a 58-year-old widow. She's vulnerable. I need to have her under my care. I email her, how you doing? I call her on the phone. I said to the women in the church, there was a funeral luncheon, I said, you need to call on her. It's not going to be me. You need to call on her. Take care of her. So in your congregation, you might have 4 or 5 women you think are pretty attractive. In my experience, knowing a woman better helps with that, because usually the better I know her, the less likely I am to think bad thoughts. So, okay, there's a couple that my wife and I used to hang around a lot with. They weren't in our church, but the 4 of us all liked each other. You notice that? It's hard to find somebody like that, because usually one of these, there's friction in one of these. But you find a couple you like pretty well, and my wife likes him, I like her, and all the way around. I remember her talking to my wife, because we used to go to Wheaton College, and we'd go to a ball game, go eat, and we'd have a nice evening together. One day he was over at the college already, and I could drive right by their house. Makes sense. They're just a couple blocks away, drive right by their house and take her over to the college. But she calls Betsy, well, I know Dan's not giving me a ride. That's right. I'm not. Why? Guess why? Number 1, it's against the rules, and number 2, I like you. Are there any attractive women in your congregation? Good, thank you. How many? Don't name their names. and don't write.
I'm almost 40, so there's some in their 30s and some.
Okay. And don't write their names in your journal for your wife to see.
What's interesting with that though is I understand the distinction between the attractive and the unattractive, but you can't have boundaries with the attractive and say I'm not going to have boundaries with you because you're unattractive.
That's right.
So you gotta.
They're general rules.
Yeah, you gotta
Absolutely.
across the board.
That's right.
And some people really take offense to that.
It's too bad.
Right.
It's my ministry. So I don't apologize. I'm giving it back to you. That's just my response. I don't say it's too bad. I say, well, these are principles for everyone. And what helps me on that is one of my attorney friends said, hard cases make bad law. Right? So you see some laws, you say, oh, that's almost abusive. Hard cases make bad law. Hard cases make bad law. My female students, pouring down rain, it's hard out there, it's coming down hard, I'm throwing an umbrella. That's it. I don't care who you are, I don't care now how long I've known you, that's just a rule. It's done. Done. I don't know, I've never thought about that. They'd probably take a video of it and put it on Facebook. Everything goes on Facebook now. Oh man.
Isn't that where it starts? I mean, in your head, you're thinking, okay, this woman isn't attractive. She's older. You bend the rules, and then once you begin to bend that rule, then where do you stop bending that rule?
Yeah, and people talk.
You did that for her, so why aren't you going to do that for her?
Sometimes it's helpful to reverse this, because I'll say to my students, how would you feel if you saw me in the car with another grad student? They said, feel bad, what are you doing? Yeah, that's right, of course you would. And they talk. The deal is here, you have more to lose than anybody else, because you're in the position of honor, and you'll be seen as the one who's taking advantage. Now, I told you I'd have zero tolerance on a youth pastor took a girl home. That needs to be known, right? That needs to be in the policy, like you. Just when he's hired, if you ever give a girl a ride home, you're fired. Just like that. Yes.
There's a table podcast with Daryl Bach and Sue Edwards. She wrote a book called Organic Mentoring about a couple of years ago.
Organic Mentoring?
That was the name of her book, but he interviewed her, and they were talking about healing the relationship between males and females in the church. And she made a comment that stood out to me that talks about when we do have all these boundaries as male leaders, it is communicating a distrust for the women.
Yes.
And it increases their insecurity.
Yes.
So that was one thing I was sensitive to when I heard. I understand the policies and the boundaries and all that. I think it's really healthy. How do you help still instill a security in females and that they can be? I know we've said don't trust anybody, but we can.
That's what
a little
Newt
benefit
said.
of the doubt sometimes
Okay.
too.
Yeah, I agree with that, the depravity part. I would say to females, you're welcome to come to me and meet with me. But now, also, I am going, just like I said, there are going to be people on the hall, the door will be open. I think you should have an open door with men today. We've got homosexual issues. Really, I'm not kidding you. I would want people on the premises there too. So she has access to me, and there's going to be a safe environment. Some of you have office situations that are too private. I would want glass. I would want a window in the door. I want an administrator who's trained to work with me, hopefully a female, and she knocks on the door after 50 minutes. And the person in with me knows that administrator might walk by any time and can look in. And I'll tell her that. Don't worry if somebody looks in. I just have her do that periodically. And that, I think you're creating safety without creating the alienation. Also, I think there is, again, a difference between mentoring to some degree and counseling. If you look at the literature today, for a woman to break in to a man's world, which is into the business world, the best combination is an older man mentoring a younger woman, because the man knows the man's world. So that's a limited context there, but there are some situations where a woman needs to be mentored by a man. I don't think domestically, I don't think how to be a woman, a lot of the more personal things, but in some professional areas, the older man is the better person to do it because he knows that world. But it is interesting, even in the professional, I've got some professional articles on this. Even then, these are secular articles. It's all about meet in a public place. Don't meet privately with closed doors. Be careful of your language. It's a lot of the stuff you'd say right out of the Bible for these secular sources. How we doing? Oh, yes.
I always teach that about one-on-one. When Mike Pence said he wouldn't meet with a woman alone, the press laughed at him so much, and especially popular people or The View and some movie people who were scrambling then to find their policies because of the Weinstein thing. What do you say? I've had some pastors say to me, okay, but in a public place, I'll have lunch with her.
Scares me. Oh, that's another one of my boundaries. Meet on your church premises in a professional setting with help. I'm not going out to eat lunch with women. I'm not meeting you for coffee. Look, I hardly have time to eat lunch with my own wife. I'm going to go out with you in public? No, I won't do it. Is it wrong per se? It's wrong for me. It's a matter of my conscience. We're going to meet here and, that's it. Yeah. Again, to me, going out for lunch is a little bit romantic. If I go out with a woman, it's going to be my wife these days. In the past, you take a girl out for lunch, you got something in mind. And I'm just not going to do it.
All right, so especially with like youth, which I work with, but like I know a lot of youth pastors won't.
How old are you?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm 30.
30?
Yeah.
Are there any good-looking 17-year-olds in your group?
That's awkward. Sure.
Why is it awkward?
Yeah, it just is. So.
Does that
what
shake you
about-
up, Zach?
What?
Does that shake you up? That question?
Yeah, a little bit.
Why does it shake you up?
I don't know, just does.
There are some good-looking 17-year-olds, aren't there?
Sure.
Need to watch out. Need to watch out. Okay. Because she admires you.
Yeah.
You married?
Yeah.
A married man is even more exciting.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead with your question.
He's approved.
You want to ask any more questions, Willie? Okay, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I don't want to ask a question.
I just think that's really bad.
We finally got him to talk.
There we go. What about like guys? I mean, there are I know a lot of youth pastors, and I'm not to this, I'll give a 17-year-old kid a ride who's a guy.
Yeah.
Never really thought about that before, but now I know with things changing, a lot of youth pastors would say that's foolish to do stuff like that. Where would you draw the line there? And
Yeah.
then that's just with the, say, normal straight guy.
I'm
You
not
got guys
yeah.
who
Yeah.
trans.
I'm not that savvy on youth ministry. I would tend to say I have different rules because I still believe that, well, heterosexuals are much more dominant, still 95% of the culture, no matter what some people are saying. I don't know. If the church wanted a more conservative policy, I would follow it. But I personally would not be bothered by you giving a guy a ride home. I think it's too edgy for me to make a restriction on that. But I wouldn't the young woman. And I can't believe the parents that would encourage it. That bothers me a lot too, but I just wouldn't do it. That's too much trust. That's what you said. They trust you too much. Give my girl a ride home. No, don't do it. Don't do it.
I was in that situation to give a ride to a young lady from the community, and I told the parents I couldn't. I said it was nothing personal. It has nothing to do with her. It's just policy. And in fact, the dad afterwards was like, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
At first, I was a little nervous. Are they going to be mad at me? Because this is a situation they could really use help. I'd be really helping them out by doing this. And they're really appreciative, actually, of it.
I think another good answer there is my conscience won't allow me to do it. It's a pretty hard person that would tell you go against your conscience. My conscience won't allow me. So I'll say that to somebody sometime about remarrying them or something like that. My conscience won't allow me. I'd like to, but my conscience won't allow me. But policy is a good one too. If the church said it, you're not at liberty to do it.
That's what I was going to say. It's to have the policy ahead of time, blame it on the policy.
Yeah,
I'm not allowed.
that's right. Yeah, I'd get fired for that. Yeah, it's very good.
Didn't you find, though, that youthful lust left when you hit about 48, 49?
No, I know it's a joke. Flee also youthful lusts. I'm not youthful, but they're still lust. Yeah. Now, some students say, well, they don't say this, but I wonder if they think about sexual relations.
You still going to get married?
I think so. I think it's.
Remember how after Jesus told the disciples, he said, well, why did anybody want to get married then? His standards are pretty high. Theirs were pretty low.
One thing you haven't talked about is hugging.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, hugging. All right, so here are my rules at Moody. No hugging. Boy, I mean, there are some women, they're just huggable as all get out. I don't do hugging. You say, I bet you don't like hugging. No, I do. I really like it. That's why I don't do it. It's very meaningful to me. Until after graduation. So then you get all these hugs. Dr. Green, I've graduated. Okay, hug you. But now, that's one thing. They're leaving. But it's another thing if you hug a woman every week after week after week, maybe 3 times a week, and that's the only hug she gets. She's got a bad situation, or maybe your situation's bad, and you really like that hug. So I think you need to be a little careful. Now, in some cultures, if you hug, you can't have a ministry. So there's some cultures hug all the time. My son married an Italian, and that whole family hugs and kisses everything that moves. The men kiss me. Everybody kisses you, but it doesn't mean anything. It means hello. So you have to interpret your culture. So hugging in some cultures just means hello. They hug and kiss, but then in every culture there's a hug and then there's a hug, and there's a difference. So I think you just need to watch out for that. Again, my students, this stuff goes down through the line, always gets exaggerated. Well, when you see Dr. Green, give him a firm handshake for me. That's what they say. And that's okay with me. That's okay. Because then they know they come see me, they're safe. It's always easy to start out a little more strictly and relax things than the other way around. It's hard to move backward with your standards. My daughter-in-law, I kiss her because she kisses me. I just know. It's going to hug and kiss. Hi, Papa. Okay. I kiss you. Yeah, whatever, I kiss you. That's the way it is. Any of you from hugging cultures? You hug everybody? Yeah, hugging, yeah. So African American culture, very physical, right? So you do that. And other cultures are like that. And so you have to interpret that, and you can't not do that. But then there are limits, right, to this too. That's right. Exactly right. With sexuality, you need to watch out for what you're looking at. It's really hard today to be pure. When I was growing up, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have your phones that you can take to bed with you. You didn't have your computers that are, they're an invitation all the time. You're just one click away from trouble. It was hard to even get a hold of a Playboy. You had to have an older brother or somebody that would get one for you, or you steal it, or something like that, even to get a look at it. Today it's all over the billboards. There are unbelievable billboards in Chicago. They're pornographic, actually. Sports Illustrated, when that swimsuit edition comes out, that is softcore pornography. Yeah, way back when I was about 13, my mom got me a subscription to Sports Illustrated because I was a sports nut and I would always read that. And then the swimsuit thing came out. Then I got married. And I remember the first time that swimsuit edition came to our apartment in Dallas. I was in seminary. My wife seized it, tore it up, and she said, "Your subscription is hereby canceled." Never had it again. Thank you for guarding over me. But again, this HALT, H-A-L-T, that's the time when you go to this. The thing that scares me most about pornography is that it never ends. You start with that invitation, that click. You're looking at ESPN or something, there's that invitation down there. Best bikinis of 2019 or something. You click that. It's 18, it's not out yet. 18, you click that. It just gets darker and darker, right? So you start in that way, and after a while you are a pervert. I mean, it takes a while, but you become a pervert. So this thing of I don't want to do it because I'm afraid of where it'll take me. Gerald May has an old book called Addiction and Grace. This is written way back in the 80s. And he was already into brain science. He's probably a Sunday school level Christian, but he was an MD, a psychiatrist. And he talked even then about brain chemistry and how your brain is changed by what you look at. Now we know today that a person who is a pornography addict he'll have brain changes like a person snorting coke. You develop lesions in your brain. And you actually are now changed. So it's not just that the brain controls behavior, but behavior changes the brain as well. So you actually change who you are. you rewire the brain and you become chemically a different person by hyperstimulation. That's what it is. So hyperstimulation visually is like snorting coke. There are things you're never meant to reach that level of excitement. Another thing is that starving the eyes makes your own wife look more attractive. It is not fair to compare your wife at 50 to a woman at 20 who doesn't exist anyway because it's been all brushed and enhanced. It's not really here. That person doesn't exist. But you're seeing her on the screen. But if you starve your eyes and you discipline yourself to stay with your own wife, then she's more exciting. So these are all good reasons to do it. You say, well, my wife is not a 10. She was once, but she's not anymore. Well, guess what? Either are you. That's nasty, I know, but you know. That's one reason why some guys don't date. Ah, goodness. So.
Dr. Green, how do you approach the issue? First of all, I appreciate your transparency here. I think we need to talk about this more often, but how do you approach the issue of masturbation?
Yeah. Well, there's no text in the Bible directly against it. The thing about Onan has nothing to do with it. You know, Onan is levirate marriage, right? And he was supposed to raise up an heir for his brother, and he withdrew, coitus interruptus, spilled his semen on the ground. God killed him because of selfishness. It wasn't because of masturbation. So this is going out to all the churches. Hello, everybody. It is not explicitly forbidden in Scripture. I would say, however, you want to be careful not to let anything bring you into bondage. That's what I would say. Is it wrong under every circumstance? So in our ethics class, one of the questions, and this may have come to you already, what about people in military service? Should I go? Yeah, I'll go there. Sure, I'm going to treat it like a class. This is real life. Our military chaplains will tell us, these guys have these questions. Can I do this over Skype with my wife? Say, boy, this is an education. I should come back to Pastorpedia more often. This is just reality. These are things pastors hear. I'll say, go ahead. You're going to be apart for 2 years? Or 6 months or something. But masturbation is not preferable, but there are times you can have a wife recovering from a cesarean section. You can have, well, of course you can be with her too. I would say try to minimize that as much as possible. That's what I'd say, yeah.
I just got it last week. I have a guy in the church who's getting deployed, and he's going to be away from his wife and kids for 2 years. We just had this conversation.
Tell them get Skype. If you have to lay it on me, just don't use my name. Okay. Yeah, that's reality, isn't it? Yeah. So hard cases make bad law. But I don't want people to be in bondage. That would be the thing. There are also some people in very bad situations you will hear where background issues come up. You could have a wife who was or is sexually assaulted, and she does not ever want to have intercourse again. You're still in covenant with her. That's a tough one, and I think there you love her. I know a friend who, if he wants to have intercourse with his wife, she's probably got some background issues there. I don't know if there's an assault or what. She wants to vomit. I am not going to pull out 1 Corinthians 7 on that situation. I'm not going to tell her that she should have intercourse and feel like she's being sexually assaulted every time. And I'm not going to tell him that he needs to have sexual intercourse with a woman who vomits when he approaches her. Those are very horrible, hard situations. But I think then those are also situations that can make a better man, where he just has to depend headlong on the Lord and needs to love his wife much more unconditionally. Now, that's just pastoral experience. That's the real deal. Are you texting him right now that it's okay?
Possibly a lot more benign of a situation, question. With the body imagery, with the family imagery that we are a church, that we are brothers and sisters, I've come across a situation where when you show affection to somebody just in words, love you brother, love you sister, appreciate you, that there are people in the congregation that are so hungry to hear certain things from somebody, father figure, opposite sex, whatever. How do you handle situations where in the course of normal responsibilities, you're just showing what we consider normal church family relationships, someone misconstrues that? I mean, do you have guidelines on things you say or will not say, even if you consider them your brother or sister in the Lord, et cetera, et cetera? Intimacy of language is what I'm hitting at.
Yeah, right. I don't know of situations where I say to a female, I love you. That, to me, is romantic. Might not be to somebody else, it is to me. I'm not sure if I've ever done that or not. Sometimes people will say that to you. Oh man, we had one church I was in, there was a music director, and he would say, okay, turn to the person next to you and say, I love you. And, I mean, it's just too artificial. And he was told, please stop that. No, don't do that. I wanted to say, well, you're sitting next to a woman you don't know. I'm going to say, well, someday under some condition I might love you. I don't know. To me, that's kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that. My answer would be, if she said, I love you, I would say, thank you for the affirmation. But I'm not probably going to return that kind of thing. I don't even like to say I love you in the Lord, because to me it sounds phony. It might be very legitimate to somebody else. I can't quite get that out. Cameron, you learned anything today? Still want to be a pastor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much of this are you going to share with your wife?
Probably a good bit.
Good. That's good. Yeah, I think the women in your church should come to appreciate you as a big brother or a dad. I really do. Yes.
It's a little lighter, but same
Yeah.
subject. I encourage young guys and my age too. At public receptions, first of all, speak highly of your wife only from the pulpit. You may not remember, but there was a time that guys would speak of the little woman or make a joke about her. But in public receptions, or even in receiving, saying goodbye to people at church or saying hello, sometimes she's got to be by your side and you have your arm around her. You're just saying to the church, I love her,
Yeah.
she's mine, and she feels that.
It's good. Very good. Yep. And one of these things in the secular article I was telling you about, they said when you're in a public place, say you're mentoring that younger woman, make sure that you're introducing your wife. If she's If she's married, make sure you introduce everybody so you know the relationships. And if I'm doing that, I'll say to my wife, oh, by the way, I'm talking to some woman who's going to enter onto a church staff. I just want you to know. My wife will say, okay, it's fine. But that introduction is a very good thing to introduce them. Now, you can't say, I think, depending on what rules you have, I don't think you can say, Betsy, here's Mary, my wife's name's Betsy. Betsy, here's Mary Ann that I'm counseling. It just depends on what your rules are. If you're counseling and you're going to tell your wife something, the counseling needs to know that. So you need to have a church policy. If I know it, my wife will know it. That's not my policy. My policy is I'll take stuff to the grave with me. There are all kinds of things my wife will never know because the person came to me, not to my wife. Some staffs, this was in my college church, there were 4 people on staff, I think, where I attended, and they said from the pulpit, whatever one of us here is in counseling, everybody on the staff will know because we discuss the situations. That's fair. If you go in now, everybody knows. But you need to know that the rules need to be clear. Who's going to know what? We've got 10 minutes. I want to talk about a little power. I know you guys like to talk about this till dark, but we can't do it. It's really such an interesting area, and one where we're vulnerable and we see a lot of problems. The main thing is have a good walk with the Lord and keep your strength with Him so that you're not vulnerable and you don't feel the need to get your affirmation from somebody else. That's really good. The use of power. The use of power from the pulpit. And I'm going to move a little bit quickly here because Newt and I are going to talk at 2:30. The use of power from the pulpit. Be careful of dynamics over content. Now, I have a couple of students every year in preaching. I'll have, in a year's time, I'll have about 60 preachers. In a couple of times a year, I will have a student who has such good dynamics, I warn them about it. I warn them not to coast on their dynamics. There's a guy out in Wheaton who is very, very dynamic. And people say, isn't he a good preacher? I say to myself, no, he's not. He's dynamic, but I've never heard him give a good idea yet. But he's dynamic. He can carry the day. He's a good speaker. He's electric. But dynamics and scriptural accuracy are two different things. You don't want somebody who's good with the scripture and a bore. I'm not saying that. But watch out for that. Some of you on your dynamics could just coast. And I would say that's an abuse of God-given power. Some women can get to do men to do what they want with their dynamics. You shouldn't do that. You should want the Holy Spirit to move them. Also from the pulpit, do not mention or insinuate that individuals are doing bad things. So you come out of a board meeting on Tuesday night and you're still mad on Sunday. And you decide, you didn't really decide to say this, but you're lacking self-control, so something just comes out in your sermon that targets that person who is against you. We need to have unity on the board. Something like, yeah, well, he knows what you're after. He disagreed with you, so you're taking a pot shot. That's an abuse of power. You have no right to do that. You have no right to say anything, make any application that doesn't arise out of the text. The use of power with the leadership team. I would be very careful about ultimatums. So you spend all this time developing elders, and you want them to be equal with you, and you want them to function that way until they tell you no. If you give them ultimatums, look, I am the pastor of the church, and I want this to happen, or else. That is inconsistent with building a leadership team. You probably can only give one ultimatum per pastorate, would be my guess. The second time they'll probably say, okay, leave. It's very damaging. So give few, if any, of these. Also, the use of power with the counselee. We've covered this quite a bit. I would say you need to look at that person as care for the vulnerability of an injured lamb. That person is coming to you, they're debilitated, their normal boundaries are not up, they're hurting, they could be angry, lonely, tired, and you need to protect them. So you need to look upon them with mercy. An abuse of power would be to take over, to dominate them during this time. Not good. Then the use of power in the home. Pastors who intimidate their wives. Boy. Whew. Now, my wife was a Detroiter, so you don't intimidate Detroiters. But because she'll give it right back to you big time. I probably could never intimidate her if I tried, but I could offend her badly. So don't try to overpower your spouses. Don't quote all this stuff about submission and all that. When you use that in the wrong way, it's just garbage. Right? There's this old thing: if you have to tell your wife you're the head of the family, you're not. Right? How many of you would say you live with a strong-willed woman? Raise your hands. Okay. I learned this in marital counseling. Dr. Green, you had to go to marital counseling? Yeah. Most pastors should go at some point. No? Really? Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, really. So I learned this in marital counseling. When you are with a strong woman, she's going to tell you what's on your mind. You better get used to it. Okay? So submission in our, first of all, I don't think more than a couple of times in our marriage I've pulled the submission card. Because the way it works is you say, I want to do something, she has a question, you're back and forth. This has nothing to do with a strong-willed woman, this has with any woman. You're working back and forth and you make compromises and you come to an agreement on what you're going to do. The submission card, that thing in Ephesians, that's probably with rebellious wives. Told you need to submit more. There have been a couple of times where we come back and forth and we can't reach an agreement, and I say, and my wife's expressed herself, and we come back to this thing, I say, well, we're doing this. She'll say, okay, because she's already spoken. And also with that is, well, this is on you, right? And that's okay. It's on me anyway. If I'm the leader, I make a final decision, it's on me. That's part of her protection. But anyway, if you're with a strong-willed woman, it does not mean she's rebellious. It means she thinks. She's an administrator. My wife has administrative gifts. That means she will question me on stuff. I will put something in a place and she'll say, it would be better if you put that there. And I'll say I'm not detailed, I think to myself, I don't care where it goes. Then put it there. Okay, I'll put it there. That's part of her gift. She's an organizer, and if something doesn't look right to her, she fixes it. Okay, so that's part of living with my wife. But anyway, you should not try to overpower your wives. Don't give any of this I'm the leader kind of stuff, and so forth. But you live with her with understanding. And then the same way with your kids. You should not frustrate your children. It would be an abuse of power to say, you're the pastor's kids, you need to act. Oh, that's so bad. That's one of the worst possible things a guy could say. They shouldn't ever do anything because of the pastor's kid. They should do something because they're a Christian. They should do something because they're your kid, maybe, but not because they're the pastor's kid. These are just some ideas. Power, you should use that constructively to help fulfill the Great Commission. You should not use power for your own benefit, which basically just means I get to do what I want. Sometimes pastors do that. They're angry because their program doesn't get through with their program. It's just what they want to do. It may not be what the church wants to do. It may not be what God wants them to do. It's what they want to do. Then you get all mad and you think your call is to another church just because you got told no. Well, I think it's 2:30. You want to come up and talk with me or anything? Or lead some other discussion?
Stay right here.
Okay.
We're going to go to your questions too. I think sometimes if we say this is for questions,
Yeah.
more people ask them. First, thank you for being so candid and so honest in dealing with real issues, not nebulous. We appreciate that. And so do the people all over the world. And I want to say to Mr. Trump, who was watching today, no, he didn't say he would watch, but what do you think? A couple of these are very slight, but you referred to them, or I did. What would you say to your seniors pastor who's in his late 70s who says, I don't have to keep that principle about meeting with a woman alone?
Finish well. You're not dead. And it's a principle of the church. You're going to get fired if you do it. Don't do it.
Blame it on the policy, too, even if you
Yeah.
mistrust him. What have you seen that's helpful about accountability with another pastor? And do you think that helps to 90% or 98? No numbers, but many pastors don't have somebody, another man.
Yeah. Really high. So I had this small group of guys I met with, just like I go out of my office at Moody down to Julius there on the corner and tell him, when we met together, sometimes we'd say, yeah, I'm attracted to this woman in the church, and name her or not, it doesn't matter if they're at a distance. And then later on, when we come back the next month, we'll say, well, how's your relationship with so on going? I think it's very helpful to be in that accountability. When you bring something to the light, its power is broken. That's a scriptural principle, right? When you hide it in darkness, it is empowered. When you bring this out, admit the attraction. I haven't done anything. I don't want to, but here it is. I click with her, right? Anybody who's honest say they know what that means. We click. So, yeah.
I've had a couple of guys tell me, well, they have a discipleship group in the church, which I think every man should have. 4 or 5 other men he's grooming and helping. Mm-hmm. And I say, you don't have to agree with this, you're not going to be as honest with them as you would with another pastor or somebody who's your peer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They might not be able to handle it because they still have a bigger-than-life impression of you. I would say that's true. I would not either.
What would you say to the country pastor? I've had 3 of them say it to me. I won't tell you my argument. He says, there's no way I can always have someone there when I meet with a woman.
I'd have somebody there when I meet with a woman. We're not meeting, or my wife will be there. I'm not going to make any exceptions. I'm just not. Because I'm the one that falls harder. And the other thing I didn't mention here, it's not just you, it's your whole ministry. It's everything you've ever worked for or other generations have worked for. The whole thing can be brought down with one accusation, true or not. But it could be true. You could do something. So that's what I'd say. It's not worth it. Not worth it.
Why do people in newspapers pick on pastors more than they do other leaders?
Because they hate the gospel. They love to find fault with God's people. I do not think we're hypocrites. I think most people are very consistent, but I do think they hate the gospel.
Yeah,
This-
and
yeah.
wouldn't it be fair to say they know we make these claims and now we're breaking them?
Yeah. Boy, the thing with Bill Hybels, it's been front page in the Chicago Tribune. Oh, front page. Phew.
We had a staff pastor who got stopped. You do think more when a television camera's on, don't you? But this was public knowledge. Got stopped for groping a woman in the, she said he groped her, grabbed her. And in the Akron newspaper, the next day it said, chapel pastor accused of sexual harassment. They knew when they wrote that headline that some people, if they didn't read the article, would say it was me. I mean, the other side of this is people
boy.
love to have something on church people.
Boy, I'm sorry that happened. That's rough.
Questions you have? Follow-up of things he said or a situation? He's being so helpful. Yes, Tim.
On the last topic that you covered from the notes, the use of power and power from the pulpit, there's an idea out there of trickling vision. So if you have an idea that you want to bring in front of your church and you want to, like a new ministry idea or something, you might tell one or two people, or you might throw the idea out in a sermon, and you know that the idea is coming. You're just not ready to reveal it to everyone, so you almost want them to get on board before you ever reveal the full idea. There seems to be some wisdom to that.
Yeah.
It could also be an abuse of power. So could you speak to how do you trickle vision or whatever phrase
Yeah,
you want to use?
I think it's good communication theory as long as your motivation is right. Say, I want to change the church government. And I go through and I say, in this situation, the text is referring to elders. We call them deacons, and it refers to deacons, and we call them trustees. And really, the biblical name is these. Okay, and then I go on. Well, that's a biblical thing. I think you can reveal some of that little by little with a plan. You have to have in your mind not to manipulate. I don't think that's manipulating when you're going to the text with it. You are revealing things in an amount that is palatable at the time. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
Let it leak.
Yeah.
It's interesting how Washington does that. They'll put a name out, fly it. They call it flying it up a flagpole, and then they say, "Oh, we weren't going to do that anyway." If it gets really bad.
Yeah.
Questions?
So, sitting in a lead seat in a church with staff, and we talk a lot about the consequences being immediate. Where does the place of restoration, future ministry come in? When you have a lot of volunteers, you have a lot of people sitting in different situations. If something were to happen, what's your place in restoring that person to future ministry and creating that graceful, loving environment for their
A person who's a pastor who has failed morally? Well, okay, I want to make it a pastor. So if you do this as a pastor, you've stepped over a lot of boundaries. Not only have you stepped over the boundary of being immoral, you've stepped over the power of abuse. You've gone to abuse of power, the regular moral and ethical principles any Christian would have. You've broken trust. So I would say there should be a pretty long and arduous restoration process if the person is ever brought back. I remember on Moody Radio, I'm not going to say the name of this person, but they were being interviewed, and the guy, he was pretty prominent, pastor. The person asked him, in what area would you fall if you were going to fall. He said, I don't know what area it would be, but I know one area it wouldn't be, and that was sexual sin. We fell into sexual sin. He was back in another pulpit in 6 months just because the church wanted a name. I believe it was just because the church wanted a big name, and they thought, I think there would need to be a long process. I would want there to be professional counseling. I would want there to be strong accountability with no guarantee. And the guy's motive should not be to get back in ministry. It should be to restore his soul. Because these things don't happen overnight. For you to enter into a relationship with a woman under your charge, there has been a long degeneration that has taken place for you to be willing to do that. So I would say it has to be very rigorous, and you might get restored and you might not. But it's very serious, very serious.
Many smaller churches, forgive the adjective, have no rigid policies about money and cash. Can you comment on that? I was with one where one person counted offerings.
Yeah. Well, if you have a smaller church, the first thing is don't ever touch it yourself. I had situations, the summertime, there aren't that many people around. Pastor, would you help count the money? No, I will not touch it under any condition. But we had 2 people count and a third person take it to the bank, I think is how it worked. That was in a smaller church too. So I think there have to be some really good, careful policies. What would you follow? What did you follow? Do you remember? No?
Well, I was going to say that we had 8 people that counted offerings, and one of them for about 6 months was stealing a little bit every Sunday. And it's a great reminder that no matter what the rules you have, they can be broken. But I think every church, never one person, never one signature. There are a lot of churches will let one person write the check. I know a church secretary that stole $30,000 over 2 years because nobody really checked the financial statements which she kept. Wow, it's crazy. And they lost almost 100 people over that, not because they didn't deal with her when they found out, but because how could you have such loose policies?
Yeah, money's a big deal. People work hard for it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think you talked about this too, but this is something for both, I guess. You talked about personal gift reporting, and after a certain amount, you would tell somebody about it. Was there just an amount or something that you just won't accept, like because it's either too much or for other reasons?
You want me to ask? Well, I think you have to have a real sense of the motive. So I had one student once who had connections with sports tickets. I mean, really big connect, like he's a broker or something. He clearly insinuated to me that I could have any ticket I wanted if I'd give him a higher grade. I was, forget you. No, another guy, he did that with
Notre Dame?
Yeah. You want them?
Yeah.
He did them with they did that with another professor too. We also have general rules that I cannot accept a gift from a student. However, the place I break that rule is with Asians. You cannot refuse a gift from an Asian. It's like kicking them in the stomach. So they're gift givers. That's their culture. So they'll give you some small thing like a bag of tea at the end of the semester as a thanks. And for that, we all pretty much just accept it. I'm not going to deny that. If it were too big, I just felt like it's too much, or if I'm being too influenced, like, well, okay, and this might be okay for somebody. We've got a condo down in Lauderdale, and you can use that anytime you want for free. Well, if they'd say you can use that and it's such and such amount of money, they're just making that available to me like anybody else. That's another thing. If they're offering that down in Lauderdale, that might turn my head eventually. It might not. So I think it's a conscience thing. But I would be careful, especially someday that person might try to turn that in to influence. Yeah.
The policy the chapel had, I thought was good, and I think I wrote it and we did it, but we got objections at times. And the point is that you can accept the gift, but you must report it so that if there ever were that turning of heads or church discipline, at least you didn't hide it.
Yeah, and it's hard to say no to a person who is of means because that's a way of giving. And you want them to be generous, so that's a little hard too. You have to kind of... And if they were to offer that to me, I would feel it would be an embarrassment to say, yeah, but there's no influence along with it. Just know that I have to report it. That's very wise, because then you don't insult anybody.
Even when my wife gave me money, I had to report it.
She gave you some? Wow.
Question? I had excuse me, right? This is just for fun. But I was paid well, large church.
Yeah.
So funerals and wedding money, I put in a special missions project. I don't think every pastor should do that.
Yeah.
But to show you, you're always tempted. One time for a funeral, the widow gave me $500. And I thought, well, I never said publicly that I turned my funeral money and wedding money in. Maybe this one I don't have to.
Yeah.
And I actually grappled with that for a little while, and I did put it in the missions fund.
Yeah.
But I thought it was too much
Yeah.
for the missionary. I thought I should have it.
Yeah.
Tim, you had a question.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that honesty too, because in that passage, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, it says, give it now so that you will not be affected by covetousness.
Right.
And that is a reason. Sometimes you just need to get rid of money. Just need to get rid of it. Yeah. Thank you.
And I don't think you should even touch offerings. You said that's, I think.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody agrees, but if somebody hands you an offering envelope, I think you ought to say, over there's the guy to give it to.
Yeah.
But Tim.
On a side note, I have a pastor friend who needed to pay for his child's braces, and God gave him 10 funerals that year so he could pay for his child's braces. So, maybe not well paid there.
So God killed 10 people for that? Those races?
Apparently, that's what I heard when he told me that story. I don't have a really robust policy manual. So there's my sense of conviction through this is like we have some piecemeal ones and some kind of half-stated ones. So if I'm going to start from scratch today, what would be the top 10 policies that you would start with? If you're looking at a smaller church, you just want to make things a little more fine-tuned for pastoral ethics and just how you go about getting your church more focused on.
If I were you, I would read that book that is at the top of your notes, Carson and Trull. They're two Southern Baptist professors, I think. They have written a code of ethics. That's really good. So in my ethics course, I have all my students write a code of ethics for themselves. I don't know, I think the 10 would have to be from your own context. And they would have to be strongly biblical. Now, your own code can be yours, but I wouldn't put anything in writing that is just your conviction. In other words, I wouldn't put it in church documents for somebody else because they might have a different conviction about it. But some of these things that Newt has here are very good. They're ones that you could hardly argue with from Scripture. Now, he does have this one here. I won't meet. Did you put this in your boundaries? I won't meet with a woman more than twice for counseling or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, that works easier when you're in an area where there are professional counselors or you have more staff. I was probably 45 minutes from a professional Christian counselor. I knew for two reasons. First, my people would not travel that far and they would not pay $150 an hour for counseling. So I might do that, but I would also want to do that with other people on the premises. Well, not I would, but I would like to have my wife with me when possible too.
And I would say, Tim, those are areas we had at the chapel. I'd be glad to send you copies. You don't have to reinvent wheel, but I do think you need to have them on paper.
Yeah.
Accept fees for funerals, weddings, counseling, or how would you determine the schedule of fees for those, for non-members?
Yes. I would not accept it for counseling because that sets you up for lawsuits. As soon as you take money, you are almost legally under obligation to give professional psychotherapy. So I would not take money, I would not have plaques up, I would not even call it biblical counseling, I would call it a spiritual direction, something like that. For funerals and weddings, I personally practice, I would do those and I let them give me whatever they want to. I did accept it in the pastorate. I would say I probably needed it to supplement my income, but I did not have a fee. Some do, I don't. Because I would do it for free. But if I get some money, that's very nice too. And I would typically, I think when I did funerals or weddings, I gave the money to my wife. Yeah.
Did she make you do that?
Yes. No. She didn't.
It's a nice gesture when you.
A lot of times the funeral homes will have it built in, at least ours does.
Yes.
So if we do funerals, it's all included in that. So we almost never have to ask because it's right there in the package, for lack of a better word. It'll say, here's what your officiant gets paid. And the family never transfers checks, at least in our area, because it always comes from the funeral home, which is super nice.
Yeah, this one I did 10 days ago, the funeral, I got it from the director. Yeah, I think that's good too. Oh,
You have to kind of, for the most part, you have to speak up for yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where I came from in the pastorate, people would just hand you some money, usually, or a check.
Yeah, they don't quite do that.
Sometimes you can talk to the funeral homes. I know our funeral director really well, so he doesn't go to our church by any means, but when I first got into town, I sat down and had that conversation with him, and they actually built that in, and then he's a super nice guy. He will actually contact the surrounding pastors and say, hey, we're thinking about increasing this year. We just want to let you guys know this is what we're kind of putting it up to or whatever, which is really nice.
Yeah. The big time commitment I would have is that when I did weddings, a wedding takes you almost all day, is I would require premarital counseling. So I'd be working with them. And at the end, often people would say, how much should we pay you for this? They wanted a fee. I never felt that I should say. So I said, if you wish to give me something, you can just decide what that will be.
Back to your first point on salaries, and I hope I'm okay adding some things.
Of course, please do.
Many churches still show the pastor's salary as a package. Let's say it's $60,000. That's crazy. Because somebody who makes 65 down the street says, well, he makes almost as much as I do. But the 60,000 includes health insurance, book, conference, and everything. I try to get churches, come on, separate it.
Yeah.
He makes 65,000 plus 15,000 health and 10,000 education, and 8,000 paid to retirement.
That's right.
So it's not fair.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of churches that have one package because it's what goes in the budget.
And there needs to be education because most people have no idea what their benefits are worth. None. A lot of places, your benefits are worth half your salary. If you're making 60, they've got 30,000 more coming through. But they have no idea what that means. They just go to the hospital whenever they need to, and it's taken care of. Yeah, you're right.
One of the best things a small church can do is have the letter of agreement, and I'll be glad to send you a copy. But it's salary, and then it has all the 5 or 6 or 7 benefits areas. And some churches go like this, like they didn't know any churches had continuing education or books or phone. Any last questions before we pray? This has been so helpful and very practical. Would you comment on this old expression, I quoted it, hard on yourself, easy on others, about liberty areas?
On liberty. Yeah.
Drinking.
Yeah, okay, and that's a good one. That's a good one for marriage too. I'm just taking it. In premarital counseling, I try to get people to expect less of their mate, more of themselves. They get this idea they're going into marriage and that person will deliver them from all problems. Get rid of that. You're going to add to the problems in some ways and to the joys. But that, yes, so hard on yourself, easy on others. I think that's right. We are to be like soldiers in service, hardworking farmers, and so on. So I do think we need to be willing to suffer some limitations. People in places of power and honor need to have stricter guidelines for themselves, I would say. So one of the transitions as my students move out of seminary into leadership, I say, you know, you haven't been in a place yet where people are watching you. You've been watched over. But now you're going to come into that leadership. And they say, oh, yeah, I need to think about that. That's right. So this thing you did as a student, whether it's dancing or having a cup of wine or something, how does that look when you're a leader? Does it look differently? I would say it looks differently. Yeah.
An old West Virginia sermon I heard once says, dancing is sin. It ends in S-I-N. Everybody knows it's sin. And I thought that was good. A cigarette is a fool on one end and a flame on the other.
So a little more about dancing. You know, millennials love to dance. I go to weddings now and they love to dance. And my students love to dance. And they would love for me to dance with them. A couple of times I have danced with a whole group. I would never dance with a student one-on-one. No way. Why? It just seems wrong. Sort of like driving alone in the car with her. But anyway, I wouldn't. Would I dance with my wife? Oh yeah. Except my wife doesn't dance. That means I sit it out sometimes. But I'm not going to dance with a
She's
student.
supposed to be submissive and do what you ask.
Yeah. I'm not going to dance with a student. Besides, my wife would kill me. I mean, hello. Okay.
Let's thank Dr. Green. Good stuff.
Thank you.